On December 6, 2017, then-President Donald Trump announced that the United States would officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He also ordered the U.S. Embassy to be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This decision was a bombshell, shaking up decades of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Jerusalem's status has long been a sensitive issue in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel welcomed Trump's decision while Palestinians condemned it. Many world leaders expressed concern that this action would further destabilize the region. The international community considers East Jerusalem to be occupied territory. Palestinians see East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state. The U.S. had previously maintained a neutral position on the status of Jerusalem. Many saw the embassy move as the end of this neutrality. This decision continues to have significant consequences for the region. Jerusalem, a city steeped in history and religious significance, lies at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Revered as holy by Jews, Christians, and Muslims, Jerusalem holds deep meaning for billions around the world. For Jews, Jerusalem is the site of the First and Second Temples, a symbol of their ancient kingdom and faith. For Christians, Jerusalem is where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. Muslims revere Jerusalem as the place where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. The struggle for control of Jerusalem reached a turning point in 1948. At the end of the war, Jerusalem was divided. The western part of the city came under Israeli control, while the eastern part, including the Old City, came under Jordanian control. In the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel captured East Jerusalem from Jordan. This victory led to Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem, a move not recognized by the international community. The Palestinian leadership has always maintained that East Jerusalem should be the capital of a future Palestinian state. Competing claims over Jerusalem lie at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The global community has long held a clear stance on the status of Jerusalem. The consensus is that the final status of the city should be decided through negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Numerous United Nations Security Council resolutions have declared the acquisition of territory by force as illegal. Before Trump's decision, no country had its embassy to Israel in Jerusalem. The decision to locate embassies in Tel Aviv instead of Jerusalem reflects this international consensus. The 1995 Jerusalem Embassy Act played a big role in the events leading up to the move of the American embassy. This law, passed by the U.S. Congress, showed the pro-Israel feelings in American politics. It also showed how much influence pro-Israel lobby groups had in Washington. This law said that Jerusalem should be recognized as the capital of Israel. It also called for the U.S. Embassy to be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. However, this law had an important part that allowed the U.S. president to delay the embassy move for 6 months at a time for national security reasons. This gave future U.S. presidents a way to postpone carrying out the law. Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama all used this, saying that moving the embassy would affect talks about Jerusalem's status. Their decisions showed a practical approach to U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. This approach prioritized keeping things stable and finding a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through talks. Donald Trump's decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem was a big change from what other presidents had done. Past presidents had always delayed the move, citing national security concerns. Trump's decision to break with this practice signaled a shift in U.S. policy. This change aligned more closely with Israel's position on Jerusalem. Trump's supporters argued that his decision corrected a historical mistake. They believed that Jerusalem, as the ancient capital of the Jewish people, rightfully belonged to Israel. However, critics saw the move as reckless and harmful. They argued that it would inflame tensions in the region, weaken the United States' role as a neutral mediator, and make a two-state solution harder to achieve. The international community condemned Trump's decision. The United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly declared America's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital to be null and void. Many saw this action as a violation of international law and a setback for the peace process. The embassy move further isolated the United States on the world stage. It damaged its credibility as a reliable partner in international affairs. Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem was influenced by many factors, both domestic and international. At home, this move played well with Trump's conservative base, especially evangelical Christians and pro-Israel donors. These groups saw the embassy move as fulfilling biblical prophecy and showing support for Israel. This move also helped Trump politically, allowing him to present himself as a strong and decisive leader. Beyond domestic political calculations, Trump's decision was also influenced by his son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. Kushner's plan, known as the Deal of the Century, heavily favored Israel and was rejected by the Palestinians. The embassy move ultimately exacerbated the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem was welcomed by a significant part of his political base, especially evangelical Christians. For many evangelicals, the fate of this city is tied to prophecies about the end times. Beyond their religious beliefs, evangelicals are a powerful voting bloc in the Republican Party. This move was also welcomed by prominent pro-Israel financial backers who have considerable influence in Republican circles. Moving the embassy was a practical demonstration of Trump's commitment to Israel's interests. We can't look at the embassy move without also thinking about the Trump administration's overall Middle East policy, especially his big but controversial peace plan, the Deal of the Century. This plan aimed to completely change the Israel-Palestine conflict by having Palestinians give up some things and supporting Israel's side. Moving the embassy was widely seen as a strategic move to keep Israel happy. However, this strategy totally backfired. Instead of making way for the Deal of the Century, moving the embassy actually made Palestinian resistance stronger. Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem was a clear example of his transactional approach to foreign policy. This approach favors quick wins and showy victories over long-term strategic thinking. In the case of Jerusalem, it seemed Trump saw the embassy move as a bargaining chip. However, this approach ignored the deep historical, religious, and political sensitivities surrounding Jerusalem. The decision to act alone without talking to key allies further highlighted Trump's transactional approach. Immediately after Trump's announcement about Jerusalem, a wave of protests and violence erupted. This decision ignited old frustrations and anger, and led to widespread demonstrations against the United States and Israel. Palestinian leaders in response to this action called for days of rage. The Gaza Strip witnessed increased violence. Palestinian militants fired rockets into Israel and Israeli forces responded with airstrikes. The immediate consequences of the embassy move were a reminder of the instability of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The international community reacted very negatively to Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Many world leaders expressed their condemnation and concern. This action was widely seen as a violation of international law and United Nations Security Council resolutions. The United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution with an overwhelming majority, declaring America's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital null and void. The embassy move also strained relations between the United States and its European allies. This decision further isolated the United States on the world stage and weakened its credibility as a mediator. Years after Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, its legacy continues to cast a long shadow over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the Middle East. Instead of advancing peace, this action has deepened the divides, inflamed resentment, and made the goal of a two-state solution through negotiation even more distant. The embassy move shattered any remaining illusion of U.S. neutrality in the conflict and reinforced the perception among Palestinians that the United States is completely aligned with Israel and unwilling to act as an honest broker. This perception has made it very difficult to revive any meaningful peace process, as Palestinians view the United States as biased and lacking the credibility to mediate a fair agreement. The embassy move also emboldened those in Israel who oppose a two-state solution and seek to annex more Palestinian territories and dim the prospects for a negotiated settlement. This decision also had a ripple effect throughout the region, emboldening other actors seeking to change the status quo to their advantage. It strengthened those seeking to challenge the international order and advance their interests through unilateral action, and weakened the norms and institutions that have long governed international relations. Moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem clearly shows how unusual and often harmful the Trump administration's foreign policy was. This decision made the existing tension worse, brought up old complaints, and made the Israeli-Palestinian conflict even more complicated. Moving the embassy left behind a lasting legacy of disagreement and distrust. The international community strongly condemned this action, showing the diplomatic costs of this one-sided move. Moving the embassy made Jerusalem's central role in the conflict even stronger. The decision to please a small political group has had huge consequences. The legacy of moving the embassy serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of deal-making diplomacy. This highlights the need for a more careful and cooperative approach to solving complicated geopolitical problems. Working towards a fair and lasting peace in the Middle East is still a long way off.